Chapter 18. 2 more makes 4. I've learned so many things in the past 10 years. Things they didn't teach in school or even in the Boy Scouts. If the me that was ever met the me that is, would I even recognize myself? I know how to take a life, and I have done it to save me and mine. I know how to butcher game and livestock, raise food to eat, track deer, and break through ice in the winter to make sure I've got water to drink. I know lots of things, but most importantly, I know that you don't have to be blood to be family. Jess, little Aaron, Becca, Jacob, they're all my family, just as much as Tina is. Even Q2 is family. Even Lord Flea. I can't imagine life without them. I don't think I would want to. David's Journal. Jess and Aaron moved steadily north, following first the Luke River, then Clinton Lake, and now some other unknown body of water. Their progress was far slower now that Jess's belly had swelled, pushing against the oversized shirt and forcing her pants to swoop in under it. They were held with a safety pin now that the button had popped off. She was so damned tired of walking. Worse yet, the awful thing inside kept kicking her. Worse yet, it kept her awake during the nights when they lay on the hard ground, exhausted from another long day of walking. Aaron still insisted on boiling any of the water they found. There was usually dirt or sand in it now that the rains were less frequent and the water levels low in the creeks. The flat, dull taste it had after being boiled tasted putrid to Jess, but she drank it anyway, despite the way her stomach roiled in protest. At least she could keep food down. That was an improvement over the spring, but now backaches and heartburn had set in. The sun wasn't even beginning to dip down over the horizon when they reached the outskirts of Clinton, and Aaron insisted they stop at the ruins of a church. Quincy had been whining and nuzzling at Jess's hand for the past hour. She was only a few months old, but the young dog knew when her mistress tired. "You've got circles under your eyes so bad it looks like you've been punched," Aaron observed, giving Jess a gentle shove down on a nearby pew after lining it with a tattered and filthy blanket. "For crying out loud, just lay down for a little while. I'll scout for some food and water and make sure the area is safe. Quincy, you watch her close and make sure she rests." The dog whined softly in response. Jess didn't argue. She was too exhausted. She sunk down on the pews and closed her eyes. Quincy licked her hand softly, whined again, and settled down on the ground, keeping contact with Jess at all times. The pup was acting weird and had been all day. Jess's back hurt, her feet hurt, hell, just about everything hurt today. Last night had been sleepless. They had both listened to the gunfire in the distance, wondering if it was headed their way. So now, when Jess closed her eyes, sleep came quickly, stealing across her and propelling her instantly into a dream. A nightmare, really. It was always the same. Men surrounding her and reaching for her. She pushed herself against the far wall, trying to escape, always trying to push them away as they crushed her beneath their sweating bodies. It was the crunch of feet on broken glass and Quincy's short, quick bark that woke her instantly, her heart pounding in fear. Half her mind was still in the nightmare. Instantly her hand found Lady, as she liked to call her gift from old Coop. She kept her eyes closed as she listened for the next step. She would die before she went back. Of that she was determined. Another quiet crunch, this one only a few feet away, and she launched herself upward despite her awkward protruding belly. Brandishing the revolver, she screamed wordlessly. The tiny child cowered before her, mouth open and stock still, a terrified expression on its grimy face. Quincy's body pressed firmly against Jess's legs, and her tail thumped against the ground as she whined in excitement. It was just a child, a little slip of a thing no older than 4 years and maybe not even that. It had matted, filthy hair that might have been a light ash brown if it were clean. To guess, Jess would have to say it was a girl, but with all of the grime it was difficult to tell. The child's eyes flicked away from Jess and focused on someone behind her, and she spun to find a young boy, older, equally filthy, looking terrified and armed with a brick. He held it defensively, eyeing her with a wary, frightened stare. Just then, Aaron's voice rang out. "Whoa, kid, drop the rock. We come in peace." She had returned from scavenging and was standing in the broken doorway of the church, with several cans tucked under one arm and a blessedly rare, unopened bottle of spring water in her hand. Both children shifted on their feet, their attention turned to her, and they prepared to bolt. Aaron smiled winningly. "I found beef stew and green beans and even some sweet condensed milk. Is anyone hungry?" The little one licked her lips at the mention of the milk and looked over at the older boy for direction. It was obvious to both of the girls that, except for each other, these two children were completely alone. Jess took advantage of the girl's interest and spoke. "My name is Jess, and that's my friend Aaron. What's your name?" A grimy thumb had found its way into the girl's mouth, and it muffled her words. "Dina." The boy spoke up. "She's Tina, and I'm David." Jess smiled at them and sat back down. They were only kids. She would be less threatening if she was sitting. Besides, she was still tired. She put the revolver away and gave the older boy a steady, reassuring look. He eyed her back warily. "We'll share what we've got with you if you're hungry." The boy nodded and relaxed his hold on the brick, finally setting it down as Aaron pulled a prized can opener out of their pack and opened the cans. Both children said nothing, just stared intently at the cans of food until they were opened and offered to them. And even after that, there were only quiet smacks of satisfaction intermixed with loud gulps. The little one, Tina, giggled as Quincy placed her paws on the girl's shoulders and licked her face ecstatically. The pup was unable to control her enthusiasm at meeting new friends, especially one of such a small size. Jess was amused to note the dog's industrious tongue had cleared away a great deal of the grime. Aaron teased details from the boy, learning that he and his sister were alone and had been for months now. Recently, they had heard gunfire again and hidden from the soldiers moving through the area. "They shot the Tubman's dog, Reggie," David noted solemnly. "We hid from everyone after seeing that." Jess and Aaron told the children an edited version of how they had been captured by soldiers and had finally managed to escape. "You did the right thing to hide," Jess assured them. "Those men are very dangerous." Tina had finished licking the last of the condensed milk from the can and boldly climbed into Aaron's lap, tucking herself against the teenager and playing with the collar of her shirt, before slowly slipping into a light doze. David offered to show the girls the hidey hole, and Aaron stood up, shifting the sleeping child to her shoulder. Tina was still young and used to regular naps. She wrapped her legs around Aaron's waist and whined. Both the girls found themselves smiling. The tiny girl was adorable despite her grimy, tattered appearance. It was only a few blocks to the hidey hole, but Jess felt nauseous and dizzy by the time they arrived. Quincy was close to her side, so close that twice she nearly tripped over the pup. "What is up with you, Quincy?" The dog merely whined and licked at her hand while trying to move closer. Every day that passed, she had moved slower and slower, and her belly grew bigger and bigger. It had made for miserably slow travel as well. It disgusted her, the thing kicking and rolling inside her, and the way her body felt like it didn't belong to her anymore. Had it ever? Since the soldiers had taken them, since that moment she had been dragged into Tent 5, her body had no longer been her own. She was tired of running and tired of the thing inside her. Her stomach twisted again, cramping painfully. Great, not only am I friggin' tired, but now I'm going to be sick. By her side, Quincy whined softly and licked at Jess's hand. The pup had been glued to her side all day, quietly whining and butting Jess's hand with her wet nose. David pointed to a tiny, dirty hole in the middle of the ruins of a house and announced, "That's where Tina and I sleep." There was no way to get down the staircase unless you weighed less than 50 pounds, and the tiny hole he was pointing to was far too small for Jess or even Aaron to fit through. A few yards away from the ruined house was an uneven mound of dirt. Aaron followed Jess's gaze and took in the crude marker and heaps of dead flowers scattered over the hard earth. It had to be the kids' parents. The sun dipped lower in the sky, and the ominous beginnings of thunder rumbled in the distance. Jess stared at the dark gray storm clouds gathering. There wasn't any shelter to speak of. Even the ruined church behind them had been missing its roof. Jess felt like screaming, crying, and just plain collapsing on the ground in frustration and exhaustion. Things couldn't possibly get worse. Or could they? Jess felt a gush of fluid rush out of her, flowing down her pant legs and soaking her tattered pants and shoes. It wasn't a stomachache. It wasn't bad food. It was coming.